Joe Biden has just dropped out of the 2024 election. This isn't too much of a surprise, considering every single poll released over the last few weeks has shown that he would go down in a landslide. He endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris to replace him at the top of the ticket, and it's virtually guaranteed that she will be the Democratic nominee this November. However, Harris doesn't poll much better against Trump, and she is one of the most unpopular vice presidents in recent history. In this video, I'm going to fill in the 2024 electoral map based on my prediction if Harris were to go up against Trump, and we're also going to go over the polling that we've gotten from the swing states between the two candidates. We're going to begin by filling in the solid Democratic states. Kamala Harris is going to win Washington, Oregon, and California. The margins in some of these solid states, like Oregon, it might be just under 12 points. However, we're going to wait a little bit to make those more specific classifications because as of right now, we don't have too much data, but it is clear that Democrats are not going to lose these three states, even if Kamala Harris replaces Biden. She's also going to win Hawaii, Illinois, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Delaware, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and the 1st District of Maine, giving her 139 electoral votes. Kamala Harris's approval rating right now sits at a negative 11.8%. Historically, she's always been more unpopular than Biden. However, the incumbent president has gotten so unpopular in recent weeks that Harris is actually performing better than Biden in terms of her favorability. If you compare this to that of Trump's, Trump currently has a net negative 12, so a pretty similar favorability for both Biden and Harris. However, in national polling, Donald Trump leads the vice president by 1.9%, and as Harris is not the incumbent president, Democrats are going to lose that incumbency factor that typically almost always helps the party in power. We're now going to fill in the solid states for Trump, which include Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Alaska, the 2nd District of Maine, as well as Iowa and J.D. Vance's home state of Ohio, two states that Republicans have dominated in over the last 8 years. And so with these solid states for Trump filled in, he leads with 149 electoral votes. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We're now going to move on to taking a look at the more competitive races. I mean, looking at this map, Nevada and New Jersey are still left. That's just how much Democrats have fallen over the last 4 years. We're going to begin in Nevada and Arizona, two states that Biden won in 2020, Nevada by 2.4 and Arizona by 0.3. However, Hillary Clinton, even though she won Nevada by the same margin, she lost Arizona by nearly 4 points. And Kamala Harris would be much more similar to Clinton as a nominee than she would be to Biden in terms of candidate quality. Joe Biden was a much better nominee in 2020 than Clinton was in 2016. And looking at the polling between Harris and Trump in Nevada, I mean, this is pretty abysmal for the vice president. She's behind by 10 points, according to the most recent poll conducted by Insider Advantage less than a week ago. Emerson College had Trump ahead by 9 earlier this year, and the New York Times last year showed Trump leading by 8. So the silver state is going to be likely Republican. There's almost no chance that Kamala Harris will win it again. Arizona, 11 electoral votes. Donald Trump leads by around 6 points on average. This is a state that Republicans are almost guaranteed to flip back, considering just how narrow it was for Biden in 2020, at a time where Democrats were in a much stronger position electorally. And with Harris on the ticket, it seems like Arizona is going to be a likely red state as well. Democrats are going to do a lot worse in Colorado and New Mexico as well. I mean, replacing their nominees so late in the game is definitely detrimental. Joe Biden has had months, even years to campaign. Kamala Harris, who really hasn't done all that much as vice president, is just suddenly being thrust into the forefront of presidential politics. She would probably have done a lot better if she had campaigned a lot earlier and Joe Biden hadn't stepped down so late. Now, Colorado and New Mexico are states that Biden did really well in 2020, winning Colorado by 14 points, New Mexico by 10.8. For comparison, Hillary Clinton only won Colorado by 4.9 and New Mexico by 8.2. Now, Democrats are having a lot of issues with Hispanic voters, which make up a majority of the New Mexico electorate. And so that is why I will place New Mexico into the lean Democratic category, while Colorado remains likely. Democrats have really made a lot of gains in the state. Jared Polis, the governor, won by nearly 20 points in 2022. Texas, though, is going to be likely Republican. There's no doubt that Trump is going to win it. I mean, in 2020, there were talks about how Biden could potentially flip the Lone Star State, but that was never going to happen. Trump came out on top by over 5 points. He won Texas by 9%. He currently leads in the polling against Biden by a double-digit margin, and with Harris on the ticket, not too much is going to change, although there is still the possibility that he does win it by a solid 12-point margin, something Republicans haven't done since 2012. Moving up to the Midwest, we don't have any head-to-head polls between Harris and Trump in Minnesota, but considering that Joe Biden is barely ahead and some of the latest polls are showing a tie between Biden and Trump, Kamala Harris probably isn't going to fare too well in Minnesota. I mean, Hillary Clinton almost lost the state in 2016, and Minnesota is a state where Republicans are doing better and better. They just haven't gotten to the point where they've actually won. But 2024 is going to be a really weak cycle for the Democrats, and so with Harris on the ticket, I would expect Donald Trump to pull off a very narrow victory in the state of Minnesota, becoming the first Republican to win the state in over 52 years. That's how big of a deal this victory would be. In neighboring Wisconsin, this was a state that Clinton lost in 2016 along with Michigan and Pennsylvania. She was the first Democrat to lose these three states since 1988. In Wisconsin, you have to go back to 1984. However, in Wisconsin today, it seems like Donald Trump is going to win the state back. He leads by 1.5% on average. We have a new poll from July that shows Trump ahead by 1%, although it is clear, at least based on all the numbers we had between Biden and Trump, and also what we're seeing between Harris and Trump, that the Rust Belt is going to be more competitive than the Sun Belt. Joe Biden made a lot of gains for Democrats. He flipped Georgia, he flipped Arizona. It seems like those states are going to easily come back into the Republican fold this time around. Wisconsin, though, is going to be closer, and it's going to be lean Republican. In Michigan, Harris is polling ever so slightly better. This is a state that she has to win. 15 electoral votes. The Wolverine state is actually showing some more positive signs, although this is a poll from back in October of last year. Kamala Harris leads by 2% in Michigan. That's the only poll that we have so far. This is conducted by the New York Times last year. However, in the end, it's still very unlikely that Harris is going to win. Michigan is going to vote pretty similarly to both Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And in Pennsylvania, we see Trump leading by 4%. A new poll conducted by Insider Advantage just last week shows the former president leading by 7 points, and Kamala Harris really hasn't performed well in any poll from the Keystone State. This is Joe Biden's birth state. That probably would have boosted the incumbent president just a little bit if he had stayed in. Kamala Harris has virtually no connection to the Midwest. Now, she does choose a Midwestern governor to be her vice president. That may change things ever so slightly, but as of right now, Pennsylvania, along with Wisconsin and Michigan, they're all going to be lean for Donald Trump. We're now going to move up into the Northeast, where first we have New York and New Jersey. Kamala Harris is going to win these states by likely margins, despite Joe Biden having won them by 23 points and 16 points in the last election. Democrats are performing terribly in these two traditionally Democratic states, but even if Harris replaces Biden, she is still going to come out with a win from these two states. New Hampshire, though, is going to be a little bit different. Democrats might have won this state in every election going back to the early 2000s, but Hillary Clinton almost lost the Granite State by 0.37%. The latest polls actually showed Trump leading over Biden in New Hampshire before he dropped out, and Kamala Harris is behind by 2 points, according to a Trafalgar Group poll from December between her and the former president. And so I'm going to place New Hampshire into the tilt Republican category. It could definitely go both ways, but Donald Trump has a very good chance at flipping New Hampshire this November. Up in Maine, this is another state where Trump is performing very well. He has led in several polls from the state as a whole, And with Harris on the ticket, I would probably expect Democrats still to win. Joe Biden probably still would have won Maine, but it's going to go down to the wire. Maine, a state that isn't really talked about too much, is going to be tilt Democratic. Hillary Clinton almost lost the state in 2016 when she won it by less than 3 points. And so with Harris being a pretty similar nominee, I would expect Maine to get pretty close again. Before we move on to the Southeast, we're going to fill in the 2nd District of Nebraska, which is almost guaranteed to be lean Republican, especially with Biden off the ticket. However, in Virginia, this is a state that is going to be really hotly contested. Both parties could win, despite Joe Biden having carried Virginia by 10 points in the last election. In fact, the most recent polls for 2024, before Biden dropped out, showed that Trump was on track to win Virginia. He actually led in the polling average as a whole, and with Harris replacing him, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. Virginia, I will still place in the tilt Republican category, alongside Minnesota and New Hampshire. These are states that both candidates could win, but right now, considering all the momentum that's behind Trump, I'm going to give the former president the very slight edge. Trump is going to do a lot better in North Carolina as well, a state he carried by 4 points in 2016 and by just 1 point in 2020. However, in 2024, it was already clear that Trump was on track to winning North Carolina by a likely margin, and against Kamala Harris, Trump leads by 9% in the polling. This is conducted by Emerson College back in February. There's no doubt Trump is going to win, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was by a likely margin. Georgia, though, this is a lot more interesting. Biden actually won Georgia in the last election, but just like Arizona, it was so close that there's no chance Democrats win again, considering how much worse of a position they're in electorally this time compared to 2020, when we had COVID, and of course Trump was the incumbent president, and incumbency fatigue is a real thing. Now, Trump won Georgia by 5 points in 2016 before that dramatic shift, and he's probably going to be able to do that again in 2024 against Kamala Harris. A poll conducted just last week in July shows Trump leading by a double-digit margin over Kamala Harris. The state is not going to be close. Georgia will also be likely Republican. And finally, in Florida, 30 electoral votes. This used to be a competitive state, but ever since Trump's victory over Biden in 2020 by 3 points, a larger victory than his margin from 2016, Florida simply hasn't been close. We saw the Republican governor and senator from Florida, Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio, win by solid 16 and 20-point margins in 2022. So Florida is a red state now, and polling between Trump and Harris that's conducted just last week shows Trump ahead by 10 points. It's going to be an easy victory for the former president. Florida could even be solid come election night. And so this is my prediction for the 2024 presidential election, now that Kamala Harris is going to replace Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. She's not going to do well. Democrats have basically already lost this election. Changing the candidates so late in the race is just not a good thing to do. And Donald Trump right now, he has all the momentum after that debate performance, after the RNC, after that failed assassination attempt. And so as of right now, 340, 198 is the projection between Trump and Harris. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. Like this video down below if you enjoyed it, and comment who you think is going to win between Harris and Trump.